In the last lecture, I talked about TCP and UDP and how they are containers that hold other protocols along with whatever data is being sent. Once again, this term is known as encapsulation. In other words, TCP and UDP are the delivering mechanisms for other protocols and their data. They are the FedEx of network communications. In this lecture, we will talk about the protocols that hitchhike off of TCP and UDP to the correct port numbers. TCP and UDP delivers the data using other protocols to find the correct ports so applications can then receive and unpack that data that it was intended for. The protocols and ports I am about to go over will be in the A+ exam, and they expect you to know these. Knowing what these protocols do and what applications use them will not only help you understand how data transfer works, but it can also help you troubleshoot scenarios that will come up in your career. So let's take a look at these protocols. All right, this is a list of the protocols. You can find them in TestOut. There's many places that you can actually download this off of websites. The one thing that you need to know is the one things that you need to do, basically, and what I suggest you to do is create flashcards. All right. You need two sets of flashcards, one for the protocol on the front and the port on the back, and then another set with the name of the protocol with the description on the back. So that way you have two sets and you can actually memorize the protocol, the port, the name, and the description. This is going to help you, trust me. If you take an hour to 2 hours out of your day to memorize these, I would do like 2 or 3 at a time, maybe spend 20 minutes memorizing 2 or 3 at a time, and just keep adding to them as you go along during the week. You'll have these memorized in no time. All right, FTP. It's known as File Transfer Protocol, and it uses TCP port 20 and 21. All right, this is the port that we use to send and receive information between systems. It uses TCP port 20 as the active port. This is mainly used as the default port for transferring and sending information, sending and receiving information. Port 21 is used for control information that includes user identifications, passwords, and certain commands for sending and receiving data. There's also a mode with file transfer called anonymous mode. All right. Anonymous mode over FTP is a method for giving users access to files so that they don't need to identify themselves to the server. Using an FTP program or FTP command line interface, the user enters in the word anonymous as a user ID. Usually the password is default or furnished by the FTP server, and anonymous FTP is a common way to get access to a server in order to view or download files that are publicly available. If someone tells you to use anonymous FTP and gives you the server name, you just need to remember to use the word anonymous for your user ID. Now, usually you can enter anything as a password. When you transfer files, it has what is known as a full feature functionality. So you can list a set of files in a directory on a system, you can rename them, you can add them, you can delete them, and provide most of the file functions that you would on your own computer. All right, let's talk about SSH. To connect over the internet using the command line, you would use what we call a console. A console is a simple application or tool that you can use to connect with another device, such as clients or servers. PuTTY is a common console to use, and if you are connected over a secure connection, then you are most likely to be using SSH. It is just like Telnet, and the only real difference is that SSH is encrypted. You use port number 22 for SSH. All right, let's talk about SSH's counterpart, Telnet. Telnet stands for Telecommunication Networks. It is used to remote into other devices such as clients and servers from a console tool as well. This is not encrypted, and anything such as your password and ID can be viewed from the other side where you're communicating to. Also, you can intercept the data that is being passed across the network, and you're able to read all the data that you pass along. The only reason to use Telnet is if a device doesn't support SSH technology, and it really isn't commonly used anymore. All right, let's talk about SMTP, which stands for Simple Mail Transfer Protocol. All right, you can send messages via email from mobile devices and computers. It uses TCP port number 25. Servers can also send email from server to server and to you as a client. Most common clients use either IMAP or POP3. IMAP keeps your data on the server, and POP downloads the information onto your computer completely. Let's talk about DNS. It stands for Domain Name System. It uses UDP port 53. It basically takes your IP address and associates it to a name. So if you had an address with the name of www.acmecomputers.com, and you enter in your IP address with the domain server. So whenever anyone types in the name of your server or the IP address, it will find it and resolve it for you. It uses a file hierarchy system similar to that of most operating systems, with a root directory like .com or .net. This is the base function of the internet. Usually you have many servers with the same information on it, just in case a server would go down. This helps with connectivity with information, and so there's always a backup, usually on servers. Let's talk a little bit about HTTP and HTTPS. HTTP stands for Hypertext Protocol, and the S on the end of HTTP stands for secure. So HTTP uses TCP port number 80, all right, and HTTPS uses the TCP port 443. And if you use HTTP, a website that supports HTTP and not HTTPS, then that information is more than likely not encrypted, and it can be seen or it can be intercepted and read quite easily. So if you're on an HTTP site, you better not have any kind of information that you want out. Basically, if you look on your browser and there's like a little lock over in the URL window, then you're using HTTPS. If there's an open lock and it's red, then that means you are not secure. You can be intercepted and read. All your information can be intercepted and read. So be careful. Okay, now we're going to talk about POP and IMAP. I believe the latest POP is POP3. And if you're using any kind of email, then you're probably using POP3 or IMAP. It is sent over mobile apps and computers. POP stands for Post Office Protocol version 3. It uses port number 110. It is the older one of the two and has basic mail transfer functionality. Mozilla Thunderbird still uses POP3, and I see a lot of the older generations still using POP3. They prefer the privacy and put the storage on their hard drives. However, I do see a lot of people in my experience that I've worked with, a lot of them come in and their files are corrupted, or they have issues with their applications not using these files anymore because they're really old files and they never converted them, and now they can't access any of their information, and it's only on one drive, so they can't really find that information ever again. So I myself prefer IMAP. IMAP, it basically stands for Internet Message Access Control. It uses port 143 and can manage multiple. It can be managed by multiple devices. So there is a security risk in that as well, but it can be accessed almost from anywhere. And however, it's more robust. You can create files within files and that kind of stuff. So it makes it easier to manage. Let's go ahead and talk about Remote Desktop Protocol. It uses port number 3389. It allows a user to share a desktop from a different location. It is on almost all Windows operating systems. And there are also third-party softwares out there that allow you to have remote access, but Windows has one built in as a feature, and you can configure it to access an application or an entire desktop. A lot of the third-party remote desktops are a little bit more, have a lot more detail to them. You can do a lot of different things with them, or you can have a lot of things that you can configure with them. So anyways, pretty much most operating systems have some type of RTP access. Windows, Mac OS, Linux, Unix, iPhone, Android, many others. All right, SMB, Service Message Brick. This is one of those that people get confused over. They try to overthink it. All it does, let's talk about what it does. It stands for Service Message Brick. It is Windows version of File Transfer Protocol. All right, it uses this protocol for file sharing and printer sharing, also commonly known as CIFS, which is Common Internet File System. If you're using older Windows, it might be using NetBIOS over TCP/IP. If you're not familiar with TCP/IP yet, you need to be. This is just basically an internet function, all right? And these three types of protocols use different ports for specific services. UDP 137 finds the hardware, like 137 is the port number, all right? And it finds the hardware's name, all right? That's all it's used for. And then UDP 138 connects the service of whatever that application is trying to run. Like if you needed to spool up or print something with a printer, this is the port it would use. All right, and then 139, if that application needs an acknowledgement that it sent that request, then it would use TCP instead of UDP. All right, and later years, Windows got rid of the NetBIOS protocols and was able to combine them into a bigger protocol called Direct Over. This assists Server Message Brick with finding the hardware and the service that the hardware requires. Okay. Let's talk about AFP. All right. AFP is the same thing as SMB. All right. Except it's for Apple. Apple's filing protocol uses TCP port number 548. It is Apple's version of SMB, and it is a file transfer protocol. It uses TCP 427 and UDP 427 for the same purpose of device over in Windows. It uses basically the server name, and then the actual, not the server name, it uses the hardware's name, like the printer, and then whatever service it needs that printer to do, it uses the other port for that. You can also use this for file management, where you can copy, move, and delete files. So it's pretty much their file transfer protocol for Apple. Let's talk about DHCP, Dynamic Host Configuration Protocol. This is basically how your internet works. So you have to learn this. You'll have less problems if you know how to configure the internets. All right, or configure a network. If you ever wanted to connect to another device or even the internet, then you need to start learning these protocols. Even though IP addresses generally happen automatically on your router, I am sure you had time where it didn't work. And in the future, you'll probably be running into instances where you have a client who could not connect to the network or the internet either. So the magic of DHCP happens on UDP port 67 and 68. In order for this to work, you need a DHCP server, which is generally some type of router. A DHCP server can also be handled from a computer hosting multiple computers that are connected to it. But that is a story for another day. This server can be dynamic, which means it leases out addresses and must be renewed over a period of time. So this allows multiple users to be able to use the same IP address just at different times of the day. Or if someone stops using an IP address and the server runs out of IP addresses, it can pull from that pool of IP addresses and then send it out to a new person. And then if that other person got back onto the server, then they would have to release and renew a new address in order to be able to connect to the network. And this happens automatically within seconds on your devices. However, if you have an important client who basically needs access to the internet at any given time, you can also get their MAC address off their device, and you can basically give them an IP address that they will use every single time, so they never have to worry about if they're going to run out of addresses or can't connect to the network. So DHCP is very powerful in connecting people to the network and the internet. And it's pretty much the standard that everyone uses in everywhere in the whole world. DHCP is pretty much the go-to for connecting to a network and the internet. LDAP uses port 389. Now, a lot of people kind of get confused about LDAP and what it does. Basically, it's a small database. It usually only has like 1 or 2 entries that you put into it, and it's the reason why they do that is because it's for quick access. Whenever you sign in the classroom and you enter in your user ID and your password, it goes to the server that manages this and makes sure that your password is linked to your user ID, and if it is, then it will give you access to your profile on your computer or your workstation here at school. It's used to store information on a network directory, like I said, passwords, and it uses authentication in order for you to access the profiles, and is in one centralized location to where 1 or 2 people have access to this information usually, and they're the ones who make changes to it and can actually grant you another password if you needed it. And they also have automated ones for giving you passwords as well, and it's the LDAP, Active Directory, and that's what Microsoft uses, is the Active Directory. SNMP is another one that confuses a lot of people. They try to overthink this one as well. First of all, it stands for Simple Network Management Protocol, and it uses UDP protocol 161 and 162. When you work in a big business with a lot of different technologies and a lot of different hardware, then sometimes you have to have some kind of manager to manage this hardware, and that's where SNMP comes in. All right, all it does is it's just simple protocols that gather information about hardware on a network. When a device sends out an error, for example, the SMP is used to detect and record these errors in what is called a trap. Right? SNMP uses 161 for queries and 162 to record anything that's out of the ordinary. Right? There are 3 different versions of SNMP. Version 1 was not encrypted, and it could not. It could only give you limited information about the devices. Version 2 was still not encrypted, but it was able to send larger amounts of detailed information about the devices. And then finally, when they came out with version 3, it was more secure, and it was encrypted, and it required authentication. And so version 3 is the one you want to have for your system, for your network most of the time, because it protects vital information about a lot of your devices that are hooked to your network. Okay, So these are the protocols that you need to learn and memorize for A+. And like I said, not only for A+, but it will help you in your troubleshooting when it comes to networking and your clients and your client machines, and maybe a protocol's not working right, or even with the firewall. Once you learn about these protocols, it's a lot easier to configure your firewalls when you know what these protocols are. So really, don't take shortcuts. Learn these because you will be using them.